أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين وأصحابه المنتجبين وعلى جميع أنبياء الله المرسلين صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ادع إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse in the Holy Quran, He speaks about a very important aspect in the way that we enjoin others and the way we preach others and the way that we try to bring others towards our religion. One of the ways that we find that many are trying to attract people to religion, and successfully, is through humanitarian means. In many of the cities you find people with small little stops in the corners, going door to door asking people if they need things. One of the most successful ways in the history of religion of getting others to join or to be interested is to invite them through humanitarian means. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this specific verse, He speaks to the believing people. He speaks to those who are in a position to preach to others, to ask others to join their religion, to understand their religion. And He gives us some pointers, some tips. ادعو إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة. When you want to teach people about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you want people to become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is very important that when you speak about Allah, we have to understand that Allah is a merciful existence. And when you want to speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to use the same type of mercy when you are trying to represent Him. When you want to speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it cannot be done through force. You cannot tell others to, or expect others to join your religion through forceful means. It doesn't work. And that's what happens. We've actually seen that in many of the countries around the world. A lot of countries, they have very large numbers of Muslimin. Very large numbers. The reason why is because the way that Islam was presented to them in their countries was through force. They had a tyrant leader who took over the country and forced Islam upon the people. Therefore, Islam became the religion of that country, and it was supposedly practiced by the people of that country. But in reality, when you go and visit those countries and you spend some time with those people, the amount of knowledge they have is very little. And the amount that they actually practice the religion is even less than the amount of knowledge that they have. It's because these people were never presented with religion. Religion was forced upon them. Bil-hikmati, through wisdom. And it's one of the things that's very important as well. I'm just bringing this as an introduction to go into the topic of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, because I apologize, I was a little bit late today. So I'm going to be going straight into the topic. And then after, I have a discussion that I have planned. So if anyone wants to join around after prayer, we can also discuss that after. One of the issues we have with a lot of people is that they have good intentions. They want to, they want people to become interested in religion. They want to preach. They want to be those door-to-door salesmen. They want people to become interested in religion. They want to do their part in spreading the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But unfortunately, not everyone is blessed with the communication skills to present to them the ideas which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually presented in a very clear manner in the Quran. They haven't been given those types of skills. And another issue that some people have as well is they don't have a lot of knowledge, but they are very excited. So you find that, especially in later years in high school, earlier years in university, you find that maybe it's the first time where we're actually seeing different places within our school that have religious clubs that have active members. You find that the members of these clubs, they want to and join in debates with each other. And you find that a lot of times the ones who are actually joining in these debates, the ones who are going towards the others and trying to discuss a certain topic, a lot of the times, unfortunately, they're the ones with the least amount of knowledge. And what happens is that when someone with a little amount of knowledge tries to discuss with someone who also has a little bit amount of knowledge, the amount of jahl, ignorance, becomes more. And it's especially hard to discuss with someone who's ignorant in the first place, because you don't have a basis from which to start the discussion with them from. There's no basis of knowledge. There's no basis that this person, you can argue with them, argue your points to them from. So you find that the person who is trying to force his argument upon the others remains in his position, and the other side also remains in their position. A lot of times, even worse than that, they become more steadfast in their position. They hold on to their positions even more, because they find that there is another group that is trying to infiltrate their schools of thought. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spoken to us. He has given us, He has guided us on the ways in which He wants us to preach our religion, to spread our religion, and spread the thoughts which bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tonight, inshallah, we're going to be commemorating the death anniversary, the shahada of Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And of course, the historians, even on this day, they differ. It's not set in stone that it's actually on the 25th of Shawwal. There is 3 different days. There's a day in Rajab, which has a weak narration. There's also the 15th of Shawwal and the 25th of Shawwal. It is a day in which we are going to be remembering one of the Imams, which I feel like, even though he has given so much, even though we will mention his name in a lot of the teachings that have been spread throughout the history of Islam, as Shia, as the ones who adopt him as one of our Imams, who go to him as one of our Imams, we haven't given him his right. We haven't given him everything that he deserves for what he provided, not only for the Shia, and not only for the Muslimin, but for humanity as a whole. And so we see that the life of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam is filled with different types of landmarks, different types of things that filled his life and that took a large part of his da'wah ila Allah, of his message through the spreading of the word of Allah as a Imam Ma'soom. And that's one of the things that us as Muslimin right now, as Shia especially, we take for granted. I think that it becomes a little bit easier for us as Shia, as Muslimin, to understand the holy figure of Imam al-Sadiq or Imam al-Baqir or any of these great Imams, because we have gotten to a point through the studying of ilm al-kalam, through the studying of all the past narrations which have come to us through the scholars that have come before us, we have come to a conclusion, a very clear conclusion about how high the rank of these Imams are, how much knowledge they actually have. It's something which is very obvious and concise for us. Whereas at the time of the Imam al-Sadiq, for example, or Imam al-Baqir, or even Imam Ali alayhi salam, these things weren't as obvious. A lot of people, they might ask that question sometimes. When you look at the personality of Imam Ali alayhi salam, for example, and the amount of knowledge that he had, and the way that he would rule on certain topics, and the strength that he had, and his worship, and the words that he had, a lot of us, we look and we question, how is it possible for someone to not have understood the rank? How is it possible for someone to have known that this person is a ma'soom, is a person whose knowledge comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and have decided at that time to look for his leadership through other means? Because it's very easy. They say hindsight's 20/20. It's very easy to look back at history and get a clear picture of right and wrong, get a clear picture of knowledge and ignorance. It's very easy. But at the time, there was a lot of political things that came into play which did not allow these people to actually understand the level and the amount of knowledge and wisdom that these Imams actually carried. And that spread from Imam Ali alayhi salam to his son Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, whose leadership was questioned and was challenged by Muawiyah, for example. That's the level that the politics played and affected those at the time. That Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, the one that Rasulullah had clearly many times spoken about as being Sayyid, or Ahad Sayyiday Shababi Ahl al-Jannah, one of the two masters of the youth of paradise. The politics at the time had allowed the people to question the legitimacy of his rule, the legitimacy of his imamah. And Al-Husayn alayhi salam as well. To the point where if they would speak on things that people would consider it their opinion, or they wouldn't consider it a fact, they wouldn't consider it the true knowledge of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, as well as Imam al-Hasan. Until the time of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, the Imams in their level, in their acceptance through the people, were not as fully accepted as we would assume they would be, based on the knowledge that we have right now of their place in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It didn't happen until the time of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, when because of the actions of the Umayyads, because of the actions of the Khulafa that came from Bani Umayyah, such as Muawiyah, such as Yazid, and those who came after, that the dynasty of the Umayyads started to crumble. And it started to be challenged. It started to be challenged by the Shia, those who were close to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, or at least those who were related to them in some way or another. They were challenged through that, and they were challenged through those who were from the lineage of Al-Abbas alayhi salam. And so we found that there was, in many places, the Abbasids would take rulership of some areas, even though the Umayyads were still in power. So slowly the Umayyad dynasty started to crumble. And slowly the Abbasids, which came into power, ironically, through a means which was also deceitful. A lot of the people at that time, they started to understand, especially through the message of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, they started to understand that Ahlul Bayt, the household of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, were the ones who were rightfully carrying the message of Islam, the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the message of Rasulullah. And they were paying the heavy toll and the heavy price for that. Imam Ali alayhi salam paid the price for it. Al-Hasan paid the price for it. And finally with Al-Husayn, it came to its boiling point. And people started to understand that maybe these people who are giving up everything dear to them, they may hold a right in some of the things that they are claiming. And so the people started asking questions until it came to the point when the Umayyads began to become challenged. And then Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam was the first one to use this time of disruptancy between the two battling dynasties to begin to teach people the true teachings of Islam. The true teachings which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam provided to Imam Ali, and they passed on through their lineage, so that this pure and untainted knowledge would continue on until the end of time. We read many times Hadith al-Thaqalayn, إني تارك فيكم الثقلين ما أن تمسكتم بهما لن تضلوا بعد أبدا. This is the knowledge, the base that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wished to preserve through them. And there had to have come a point in which they were able to teach this knowledge which was provided to them through Rasulullah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the knowledge of the Quran. That time began with Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam. He was the first one to establish the schools. Now obviously they weren't schools like we have schools right now. They weren't places with classrooms. At the time of the Prophet, at the time of the Imams, for a lot of the Muslim history, Islamic history, the main location for almost everything the Muslimin would do was the mosque, the masjid. Unlike right now, we find a lot of the masajid, when it's prayer time, we open the door and we come and we pray, and then when it's done, we have someone who locks the door and we leave. And the masjid remains closed until we have another use for it. And that's not just in the United States, even in our countries. A lot of the places, especially the big masajid, they get locked when they're not in use. Meanwhile, at the time of Rasulullah, at the time of the Imams, the masjid was the most important place. It was a place where if there was an important message, they would call the people to come to the masjid because that's where it would be relayed. It was even the place, aside from a place of worship, it was even the place where if a person had a sword which was, for some reason it was messed up in a battle, for example, he would fix his sword in the masjid. The masjid was everything. And that's how Rasulullah intended for the masajid to be. That's what Allah intended for the masajid. The masajid, al-jami', the word jami', the place that people come and they gather in, was intended for it to be a place which they gather in at all times and for all purposes. Not like right now, only for worship. So the madrasa, the university that Imam Muhammad al-Baqir opened, was actually just sitting in the masjid. Was actually just gathering a bunch of people who were interested in learning and teaching the teachings of the Prophet. And Imam Muhammad al-Baqir wasn't known as much as Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq for teaching teachings aside from Islam. We find that a lot of the other things, and I'll get to that in a moment, were from the things which Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq specialized. Imam Muhammad al-Baqir started speaking about theology, ilm al-kalam, the teachings of the Quran. The true theology in which the Prophet preached and Imam Ali preached, which began to become fuzzy and unclear as the years passed by after Saqifa. Now, one of the things that we can be sure of is that if at the time of Rasulullah the people actually gathered and joined behind the leadership of Imam Ali alayhi salam, it wouldn't have been just something which would have been a political statement or stance. Now, that's one of the things that the Sunnis think, and of course the Sunnis are our brothers, that's one of my main topics tonight. They think that our issue with the Khilafah is that we want someone else to be the leader. It doesn't matter who's the leader of Islam on a political level. If it's one of the Imams, that's great. Because then we know that the person who is leading and guiding the Muslimin is rightfully guided from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the issue isn't there. The issue is that if Imam Ali alayhi salam was the first Khalifa, then he would have been the main source of knowledge and the theology which would have been taken from him at the time of the death of Rasulullah would have been the one from a pure source and not one which would have been questioned because of the fact that he wasn't considered the leader of the Muslimin. And therefore they went to others, some of the other Sahaba, for their teachings on Islam. So after the years went by, the Islamic knowledge became cloudy in the eyes of people. This is when the role of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir became more relevant. He began to teach people about Islam. He began to teach people about fiqh. He began to teach people about kalam, theology. And one of his main students, his most important student, was his son, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, who from a very young age became a prominent individual in the circles of knowledge. To the point that at sometimes some people would come to the house of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam to ask him a question. And he wouldn't be there, or he would be busy, or he would be... So Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq at 5 years old would ask them, how can I help you? What's the purpose of you coming to our house? He would say, I'm coming to ask your father a question. He would say, my father is busy. Perhaps I can answer your question for you. And so many times he would. One of the questions that was posed to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq at 5 years old was, are the actions which we do, are they attributed to us or are they attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Now us, right now, as adults or young adults or older adults or as parents, if we were asked this question, we might have an idea because we've listened to a few lectures. We might have adopted some thoughts. But imagine at 5 years old, someone asking a young child this question. And the way that Imam alayhi salam answered the question was one that showed that it wasn't just something that he had memorized. It showed that even at 5 years old, he had the intellect of a grown individual. When he answered the person, he said to him, the person asked him, are these actions attributed to Allah, or are they attributed to us? Or are they attributed to both? And the Imam answered him. He told him, if the actions were attributed to Allah only, then it would not be logical for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to punish us in hellfire for an action that He did. And if the action was attributed to Allah and to us, then it also would not be logical for Allah to only punish us and to keep Himself away from hellfire. Therefore, the only logical answer to the question is, based on the logic of the Quran, that the actions that we do are ascribed only to us. Now, of course, the power, the abilities that we have to perform these actions, they're from Allah. This is why we say in prayer, بِحَوْلِ اللَّهِ وَقُوَّتِهِ أَنَا أَنَا أَقُومُ وَأَقَعُدُ. Through the strength of Allah, I will. So I take that strength from Allah, but the action is my action. At 5 years old, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam answered the person with this answer. Now, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, in this university, we're going to call that a university, he took the teachings to a new level. It wasn't only about theology, it wasn't only about fiqh, it wasn't only about tariq, it wasn't only about Quran. But some of the most prominent scholars in other fields also were the students of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Whether it's in chemistry, and we have all heard of Jabir ibn Hayyan, was one of the students of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. Whether it's in biology, whether it's in many other aspects of knowledge, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam's university, his school, was a source of knowledge for all those who were seeking to learn. And it wasn't just for the Muslimin. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam's personality was such that it attracted even those, not just those who are not Muslims. It attracted those who don't even believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come and ask him questions. And this is because they trusted that if they came and they asked him these questions, they would not be judged. They trusted that if they came and they asked him these questions, that they would receive an answer from someone who is in a position to answer these questions. One of the worst things you want to do as a person in a position of knowledge is to debate someone who is not knowledgeable. It's one of the most frustrating things you'll ever do. And it's one of the things that I think that the three main positions in life that have to go through this, actually really two, is the people in religious positions and doctors. Because a doctor studies for 10, 15 years in university, he becomes an expert in his field, and then everyone seems to have an opinion on something that's going on, and the last person whose opinion is asked on the subject that's going on, whether it's something with the body, someone has an ache, someone has a pain, is the doctor. Everyone thinks they're an expert. So anyways, one of the toughest things to do is to have a debate, is to have a discussion with someone who's not knowledgeable. They came to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam because they trusted that he was a person that had the knowledge to answer their questions in a manner which did not degrade them, which is something that we find is very rare, even in this day and age. Even though we have been living in mixed communities, we find that we still are unable to debate with those who disagree with us. And it's even more unfortunate that sometimes when I'm speaking in this manner, your thoughts might go directly to a Shia debating with a Sunni, or a Muslim debating with a Christian. But unfortunately, even within Tashayyu', even within our own sect, we find that we have no tolerance for disagreement. So we find that everyone has their own sect and their own groups, and they all gather around together. And Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, he represented the openness to discuss with those who agreed with him, so that they can further their knowledge and they can further their understanding of Islam. And he also represented that openness to discuss with those who do not believe in the same things he believed, to also call them to religion, to also teach them the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the quotes of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam And a lot of the quotes, which was beautiful from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, a lot of things he would say. Now, of course, his students had other things. Now, if you go to the books that were written during his time, a lot of them were written by his students, قال الصادق, قال الصادق, قال الصادق, and they were his teachings. But when he would actually go to provide them with words of wisdom to live by, almost all of his words would be قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. He'd always speak about the narrations of Rasulullah. So one of the most beautiful narrations that Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam speaks about from the tongue of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he asked the people, he asked them, and imagine being asked this question and being provided with something which from a infallible Imam. So it's guaranteed that what he's telling you is truth. He asks you this question, and if you are able to follow it, you're guaranteed paradise. Al-Imam says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم, do you want me to teach you something that if you follow, you will be guaranteed paradise? They say, of course. You're guaranteeing me paradise for an action that I can perform. What is this action that I can do? Al-Imam says, or Rasulullah says, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, احفظوا لسانكم. Watch what you say. Protect your tongue. Think about every word you say. It's that simple. Watch what you say. Think about every word before you say it. And this will be an open door for you to enter paradise. Why? We find that most of the sins, most of the issues that a person can fall into in his life are the cause of his tongue. Some of the biggest sins that Allah speaks about in the most ugliest ways in the Quran are those which are through the tongue. Al-Istighaba, for example, Allah likens it to eating the dead flesh of your own brother. Al-Ghiba, Al-Namima. Lying in business. Isn't that something that we see often? It's almost like you can't run a business these days without lying. Do you want to enter paradise? You have to watch your tongue. Another thing which the tongue is mostly responsible for, fitna. And fitna is, in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, worse than killing. Fitna is worse than killing because in many ways it leads to more killing than me shooting a gun. How many people around the world have we seen killed because of the words of those who don't understand the effects of their words? They think that it's just something you can say and it's forgotten. Nothing's forgotten these days. Whether it's a clip that gets sent around on WhatsApp, or it's a video clip that you watch on YouTube, or it's something written in a book. The words that you use are never forgotten. And the words that you use are often the ammunition that others use to kill. And you've heard in many countries how many of our Shia brothers, for at least, I'm only going to speak Muslim now, I'm not going to go to other religions because everyone is a victim of fitna. But at least with the Shia, how many of our Shia brothers and sisters have died because those people who think that they can go on pulpits in front of cameras and speak ill about people who others revere, who they hold in high regard. One of the things that they don't understand as well, and this is something that I know for a fact, right now, for example, one of the biggest plagues in the world is ISIS. One of the biggest plagues in the world is the spreading of takfiri Islam. One of the things that they don't know is that a lot of these people who they are bringing and they are brainwashing and they're sending out to kill old, kill young, kill children, Muslims, Christians, it doesn't matter. One of the ways that they are brainwashing them is by gathering them in rooms, turning on a TV, and showing them video clips of some people in some parts of the world wearing turbans, speaking ill about this person or that person. It's one of the ways that they spread ammunition. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, one of the things that beautifies his character. If we look at the people who were students under his tutelage, the ones who were the ones who benefited most from his guidance, the most famous at least. Now they say that the amount of students that graduated or that learned from the school of Imam Sadiq, they say it was close to around 4,000 students. Some of the most famous students were ones who to this day are famous Sunni scholars, the ones who the Sunnis follow, the ones who are the imams in fiqh of our Sunni brothers and sisters. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam was in a position so highly regarded by all of the Muslimin, and we have to remember this is years after the passing of Rasulullah. This is years after all the fitna that happened and all the problems that happened between some of the Muslimin, and for example, some of the battles like Al-Jamal. This is years after this happened, and all the problems. And still, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq was able to gather all of these Muslimin to become students and to be their guider. And we find that whether they were those close to him from the Shia, and some of those very well-known characters, some of them are Ashab al-Ijma', those who, if they appear in the chain of narrators, we consider the narration correct. Those are nice and well. Many of them, hundreds, thousands of them. It's only normal for there to be those who follow Al-Imam alayhi salam. Now, how many of them are sincere? That's questionable, obviously, because we have seen some narrations. We have seen at some point some people come to Al-Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam and they ask him, they say, right now there's some issues in the leadership of the Muslimin. We have the problem between the Umayyads and the Abbasids. You have these thousands of students. You have all this respect. You command all of this respect from the people. Why don't you gather an army and force yourself as the Imam of the Muslimin? And this is the famous narration. Now this narration seems to change based on how we want to use it, but this is what happened in this narration. He asks this person, he says, go inside of the clay oven. Go inside the clay oven and sit inside of it. And the person was surprised. He might have been angered. I don't know how he felt at why the Imam wanted to harm him for suggesting such a thing. And so one of his friends, one of his followers comes to him and he asks him, he tells him, he orders him, go inside of the clay oven. So that person, without question, without asking why, without even knowing what the discussion is, goes immediately and sits inside the clay oven. And he says, if I had a certain number of people who were as sincere to me as this person, I might think about it. But unfortunately, I don't. It's the same issue that Imam Hussein had. So it's very easy to become a student. It's very easy to take knowledge. But to become sincere, it's a whole different topic. Anyways, my point is that Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, as a guider, as a teacher, was not only a teacher for the Shia. Right now we find that when we gather, when we open centers right now in all parts of the world, we open it under Shia names. We open it only with entertaining Shia scholars, only Shia thoughts. And unfortunately, in some places, we entertain some thoughts which not only are they Shia, but they're anti-others. And this leads to a degradation in the relationship between the Muslimin, between the Shia and the Sunnis. We find that the ways in which we connect with each other, the gatherings that we have, and even if we do have gatherings, they're not with pure intentions. They're just to sit down, have dinner, and take some pictures. The ways in which we are attempting to join the word of the Muslimin, and the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted and had ordered and commanded in the verse, Inna ummatukum ummatan wahida. Your nation is one nation. The Muslim nation is one nation. It's not Shia, it's not Sunni. وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُونَ. And I am your Lord, so worship me. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted. And this is something that all of the Imams prior to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq worked so hard to preserve. And one of the ones who worked almost the hardest to preserve that was Imam Ali alayhi salam. When he was forced to give up many things, when he was forced to endure many hardships for the sake of keeping the peace between the Muslimin. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam played a vital role in reviving the spirit of the oneness of the Muslimin. Now, how can we take the leadership of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam and apply it in our everyday lives? 15 minutes, okay. How can we take the leadership of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam? How can we take his teachings and apply it in our everyday lives? Because that's one of the things that I think that many of us, we neglect. And I think that's the fault of the scholars, actually. I think that's the fault of the leadership of the Muslimin. The way in which the Imams have been presented to us has been in a way that makes them such that they cannot be those who we emulate. Why? Because the Imam that we are trying to emulate, we raised him to a level that he is no longer human. So it makes it easier for that person who is, maybe less connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is unable to leave some of the sins that he is doing, and give him a bigger excuse to say, well, that's al-Imam, and I cannot be like the Imam. One of the biggest issues we have is we've raised them to a level, and that's one of the things that al-Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam and al-Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam battled in the same way that al-Imam Ali alayhi salam used to battle on the battlefields. The idea of ghulu. The idea of raising the status of Ahlul Bayt, and at that time there was many different sects that began to appear. The idea of ghulu was the biggest battle that the Imams had to fight at their time. Imagine being in a position where your only known teacher is your father, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir. He wasn't known to have gone to any high-ranking university. He wasn't known to be a person who owned many textbooks. But yet he had a great and vast amount of knowledge. Being a student of that school and yet being fully educated in chemistry, in biology, in astrology, in mathematics, as well as religion. And imagine that all being in a time before Google, before internet, before computer, before I was able to think of any question and immediately find an answer. This left the door open for many people to get the idea and to spread the idea that these Imams were not humans. These Imams were not humans. These Imams were in the same way that other religions took certain characters and they said that they were God incarnate. So one of the issues that we have, one of the issues that they battled was the fact that it was ghulu. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq said, in Fulan, a particular student or ex-student, his name is Ibn al-Mughira, was one of the biggest perpetrators, was one of the biggest criminals who would go and take the books of my students. He would send people to borrow the books of my students, and he would take the hadith from me and he would change them to add certain ideas which I did not speak of, or my father did not speak of, to attribute to us the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To change them, to add a hadith, to delete a hadith, to remove them. And this is one of the issues we have right now, is that we've put the Imams in such a position that we can't follow them, we can't emulate them, because we've put them in a position where they are no longer humans. And that's actually one of the main reasons why Allah made the Imams and made the prophets humans, and He didn't send angels. So that we can see that someone who was like us, who was born in a similar manner as us, who had the same intellectual capabilities as us, is able to reach such high levels. The issue of al-Wahda al-Islami, the oneness of the Muslimin. How do we take the teachings of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, Imam Musa al-Kadhim, Imam Ali alayhi salam, and apply them to our daily lives, and so that we can one day, and at least to a certain degree, achieve a level of oneness, achieve a level of unity between the Muslimin. One of the biggest steps that we've taken in recent years, and I think it's an issue that it took too long to get to this point, was that we finally got to the point where our senior leadership is stepping in. Now the Imams, they were the ones who drew the lines. They were the ones who made sure that none of these red lines, none of these issues, none of the problems that can come from the irresponsible use of your tongue, none of the issues that can come from that happened between the Muslimin. There was one of the main responsibilities of them at a time in which they had gathered all of these Muslims in the masjid in Medina. One of the things that we have to, whether it's the leadership at the level of scholars, whether it's leadership at the level of centers, whether it's leadership at the level of university club presidents, I see it in different places, in different levels. And everyone does their part. One of the things that we have to fully implement in our lives, and before we implement it to others, we have to actually believe it. And that's one of the problems that we have, is that I think I want to try and say this in a way that's not degrading to some, but one of the issues, we're not truthful with ourselves. We've been brought up in such a way, and we've been listening to teachings for so long that have provoked us to a point where we find that joining hands with others is something which is irresponsible, is irreligious. And I remember, I'll give an example of this in one center. One of the main issues, one of the main events that we have during our year as Shias, as Muslimin, is the event of Ashura. And no one can deny the outrageous events that happened in Ashura that were at the command of the tyrant leader Yazid. But one of there's a lot of spin-offs of Ashura, whether it's actions or whether it's ziyarat, whether it's ad'iyah, a lot of spin-offs to Ashura. One of the spin-offs to Ashura is a ziyarah which is known as Ziyarat Ashura. And one of the parts of Ziyarat Ashura, it begins to curse. Allahumma la'an fulan, Allahumma la'an kada, Allahumma la'an kada. There's a lot of cursing that's going on in the ziyarah. And it gets to a point, Allahumma kada, ثم العن الأول with I don't read it, and I don't أول ظالما ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تبعا له على ذلك. المهم, one of the parts of the ziyarah, it asks us to, or we are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to curse the first and the second and the third and the fourth and Yazid khamisan. And so I'm not debating whether it's true or not. It's not my issue right now. My issue is that some Sunnis in a certain community took offense to that. Some Sunnis took offense to that. So at this certain center in one of the cities, people came to the leadership of that center. They decided that the ziyarah that they had on the wall, we're going to take it down. Not because we believe the ziyarah is bad, Not because we believe it's not correct, but because in the interest of the unity of Islam, in the interest of things which others take offensive, we're going to remove it. It's not like it's the 5 prayers. It's not the pillar of religion. We're not telling people not to fast. All we're saying is something that others are taking offense to, we're going to remove it off the wall. Fadal Hajj.
It's not, brother, it's not 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Abala Zalim. I really don't think we should be defensive in it. But whosoever did zulm to Ali Muhammad, that's lanat on them. So we don't mention, nobody is mentioned in name, and we can very safely say that we did not mention.
You're right, you're right. No,
Imam Ali lived with them, so that's when our argument.
Of course. That's not the argument here.
Not second, not third, nothing is mentioned. Anybody did zulm on Muhammad or Ali Muhammad.
Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Anyway, so the leadership came and decided that this ziyarah, we're going to remove it off the wall. We can put ziyarat warith. And what happened was a large group of people, they took offense, the Shia, they took offense to this being removed down, as if we were asking them to destroy the Kaaba. And so what happened was they started to boycott the Islamic Center. And they started spreading rumors that these people are the enemies of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam because they look to remove these things. Now, this is just an example of a point that I'm trying to speak of, is that at a core level, the teachings of Ahlul Bayt are much beyond a ziyarah or a dua. The teachings of the Ahlul Bayt should be at the level of your heart and the level of your mind. It's intellect. None of these scholars, especially Abu Hanifa, none of these scholars who graduated from the school of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam came out and they made a big issue of writing a ziyarah or writing a dua. The big thing that they took from the school of Imam al-Sadiq was intellect, was knowledge, was something that they can provide to others, was something that they can strengthen their heart with and strengthen their mind with, so that they can have a strong mind and heart to communicate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the issue we have is that at some level, and we can debate this as much as, at some level, we have been fed hate for so long. We have been fed hate for so long that if we come and we try to make unity, if we come and we want to sacrifice some things which are secondary, there are some who are going to consider that deviating from the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. This is where the unity of, not the Muslims, the unity of the Islamic leadership comes into play. When the leadership of the Islamic community, when the leadership of the Shia community opens up to the idea that Islam is beyond Shiaism, that Islam is beyond only the way in which we worship, that Islam is the way in which Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam ordered his followers when he said to them, pray in their congressional prayers and join with them in their funeral ceremonies and visit their sick, so that in the future, when people come and look at you, those who consider themselves the student of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam will say, Rahim Allah Ja'far ibn Muhammad laqad addaba ashabahu. So that in the future, when people look at you, the followers of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, they will give rahmah. They will speak high of Imam Ja'far because of the way in which he taught his followers. And this is where the continuation of it, كونوا زينا لنا ولا تكونوا شيئا علينا. Be those who beautify us in our message. Don't be those who bring us a bad name. And that's very important. Those words are the most vital words that Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam spoke. Beautify our message. Beautify our path. Don't be from those who bring bad words to us. Now, that's one of the things that we have to use as a scale for our actions. That's one of the things that we have to use as a scale for the words. That's one of the things we have to use as a scale for when we have discussions or lectures or events. Is the message that we are going to be portraying to those in our gathering one that glorifies the message, not the person, not the personalities, glorifies the message of Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam? Or is it going to be one which has people leaving the room saying, these people are outrageous. These people do not respect our minds. Is there going to be a message which leaves people thinking and feeling closer to Allah? Or is there going to be a message which leaves people thinking that these people, have they left? Has the humanity in them began to disappear? Have they moved towards some of the actions which cause them to be inhumane? Some of the actions that we can do, whether it's an Ashura or other, these things that we can do, is it going to be something that glorifies the message of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq? Or is it going to be a message that brings shame to the message in the teachings of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq? Al-Sadiq alayhi salam lived his life to preserve these teachings. Al-Sadiq alayhi salam was poisoned because he held steadfast in his teachings, because standing with truth, no matter how hard it might be sometimes, even if it gets to the point like Imam Ali alayhi salam, مَا تَرَكَ لِي الْحَقُّ مِنْ صَاحِبٍ, it might leave you to the point with no friends, but standing with truth, the truth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is something which is our responsibility, and it's something that we have to understand and fully understand if we want to be the bearers and the carriers of the message of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq wa Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. رحم الله وعظم الله أجركم الإمام جعفر الصادق عليه السلام. والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.